Right, Shalom. Welcome to another Expert Inside interview. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP, online sales magazine, and Pipeliner CRM, joining you. Well, I was going to say as usual from a sunny San Diego, but it's actually a very rainy San Diego today. We do get rain occasionally. And today I'm delighted to be joined from what they like to say is across the pond here in the UK, from Oxford, Andrew Hulbert. How are you doing, Andrew?
I am really good, thank you. And it is very cold here. I think it's about 1 degree outside. So we're hoping for snow. Not snow like they get in San Diego, I'm sure. But yeah, maybe a bit of snow here. We'll see.
Yeah, and Andrew scaled Pareto FM from scratch into a $50 million company with 500 staff, building a people-first culture and setting new industry standards, and ultimately selling in a nine-figure uh, private equity exit. Coming from a Kansas State background, journey is one of grit, trade-offs, and redefining success after the big exit. You've over 40 awards, 2 books, and a decades of industry impact. And what we're going to talk about today is literally how you went from cancel estate to $50 million private equity exit. And so let's go start back at the beginning, Andrew. When you were growing up on that cancel estate and you were first starting out, what was your concept? What did success look like to you at that point?
Yeah. It's actually a really good point, isn't it? Because what does success look like to any of us? And actually, my version of success has probably changed as time has gone on.
Mhm.
I think for me, when I was growing up with council estate family mentality and working class mentality, success looked like getting a decent job that was a secure job that you'd have for a long time. And maybe you'd earn 30,000 a year. I remember my first job, my boss said to me, "How much money would you like to earn one day?" And 30,000 a year was my answer. And I think they rubbed their hands together and said, "This is going to be a
Yeah.
great journey, having this cheap guy come and work for us." My mum had been in Sainsbury's for 30 years in a supermarket, and my dad had been in a factory for 46 years. So like he was in a factory from the age of 15 to 62. So
Mhm.
like I'd seen hard work, and success for me was getting a long-term job. And not that that's what I wanted to do, but that's what my parents had done, and that's what
Yeah.
success looked like. And that early working class mentality started there.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing for people to understand is how much we are shaped, by yeah, obviously shaped by our environments, but how we can carry those ideas into adulthood and into business, like, the ideas of scarcity and things like that, and
Yeah.
having a fear relationship with money. I think those.
Well, yeah, I think for me as well, early on, what I saw is my parents were working incredibly hard. They were both very loyal. They would always go in when they were sick. They do overtime if they needed to. Like they were those parents. They would
Yeah.
always do what the business needed from them. And I didn't always see that they were rewarded for that as like low wage workers themselves.
Hmm.
And I guess what it taught me very early on is whilst that was a path I could go down, I didn't necessarily want that for myself. That wasn't what like an ambition looked like for me, because I could see this capitalism curve that they were following, which was get a job, get a mortgage, pay
Yeah.
in that to your government, take your pension and die. I was
Hmm.
really keen to get off that curve as early as possible. And entrepreneurship was my way to do that.
Yeah. So what was it like in your first year? I mean, because you're going against, you're not going for the safe job and the
Mm,
pension and all of
mm,
that. What was that
mm,
like, and how did you keep yourself going? Because there had to be moments when you were questioning the
mm.
wisdom of your decision.
Yes. Look, just for a little bit of context, so I went to university and went on a graduate scheme, and
Mhm.
I ended up working for a facilities management provider, which is what the business was in. And I did 4 years for them. But already as a 21-year-old, I was working very, very long hours.
Yeah.
And I had a team of 250 at the age of 24. I had quite a big rise to the top quite quickly. We got bought out by a big business that I worked in for 2 years, and I just hated that big company mentality versus the little one that we had before. So that first year for me, although it was challenging and it was scary and it was risky, it was also a bit of a relief because look, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an
Mhm.
upstart. No one tells me what to do. I'm not very good at having a boss, and I wanted to do it my way. And when I'd worked for the big company, I'd found a real frustration that I couldn't do things the way I wanted to. I couldn't do things the way that I could see was better than how we were
Mhm.
doing them. So that first year of business, although it was scary, and look, I was in my bedroom on the first day with a laptop and no money or backers or friends or
Mhm.
contracts. I mean, I literally had nothing. And then to go on the journey we did was remarkable. But it just, yeah, I felt lucky to be there, even though I created it myself. And all those frustrations I had with the big corporates, I then didn't have to deal with any longer.
Yeah. And then tell me how, I mean, facilities management,
Mhm.
high turnover, you know,
Yep.
not fantastically paid jobs or whatever.
Yep. Yeah.
So how did you manage to develop a people first culture in an industry, in a segment with high turnover and maybe not the
Yeah.
greatest like earning
Yeah.
potential?
Yeah. That was almost one of our core three pillars of what made the business a success. I felt the bigger companies had just lost touch with people. They weren't putting them first. They didn't treat them well. It was really basic things like, let's just say your pay was wrong. You
Hmm.
wouldn't have your pay rectified until the following month. Well, most people can't get by without their full pay. And it was really just bad things like that that were quite common within the sector. We just turned it round. We just said, right, what is it that people on low wages need to be able to work brilliantly for our organization? And coming from that background myself, I'd seen that firsthand in terms of the people that brought me up with my mum and dad. So what we did is we tried to create the most fantastic environment for normal workers to come and
Hmm.
work for us who weren't on super like fantastically high wages, but they were earning a great job and they were consistently delivering. And sometimes they needed flexibility. So we would always try and make sure that our job fit around them as much as we could. The other thing we did was we delivered hundreds, so 150 social initiatives. So it was all about creating an environment where it was brilliant to work for us.
Hmm.
And that could be like supporting various different groups. It could be buying football kits for young kids. It could be planting our own forests or wild gardens or making our own honey or parachuting. Like there are all these amazing things that we did, but it was always about making sure everybody could be part of that journey. And this whole environmental social governance, the ESG piece, it worked very well for us because we were able to bring diversity to our teams. And that was something not really seen before within our sector.
Hmm.
And being disruptive was really important for us as an SME. And we looked very different and we thought very differently to our big competitors. And that was partly how we started to build that people first culture.
Right. And then I presume as you built that, then recruiting became easier because people were obviously telling people about where they worked,
Yeah.
the environment you had created. So I guess it would probably became a lot easier to recruit.
That's a really interesting question. Most people ask it the other way around. They said, "Well, how as you got bigger, how did you scale the
Mhm.
culture?" But you're absolutely right here. As we got bigger, the word got around about our culture and the
Mhm.
sector. Although it's £100 billion sector in the
Right.
UK, it's a small sector, right? Word gets around very quickly, both good and bad. So for us, we were able to then attract people. Genuinely, people were knocking at our door saying, "I want to come and work for your organization." When you're a really early entrepreneur and you have nothing, trying to
Yeah.
convince people to come and join your business is a
Yeah,
very
yeah.
difficult thing to do because it's a risk and you're taking the risk as an entrepreneur, but can you convince them to take the risk as well? And actually, for us, we got it right. And like retention rates in this sector, as you mentioned, are very low. So there's a high turnover of staff. At some points in our earlier life, we were like 90% staff retention. And the other thing we managed to do was the senior management team that I personally hired every single one
Mhm.
of them on the 10-year journey that we went on, we didn't have a single person leave that senior management team.
Wow.
Everybody that joined stayed on the whole journey. And when people ask about how do you scale a business and make sure that the culture remains, hire those 15 people as early as you can and make sure they are the leaders for the business because they know the heart, they know the stories, they know what the culture is. And that was so successful for us. You don't hear many businesses that are able to retain all of its top talent as it goes through its processes.
No, and no, indeed you don't. And I think part of it is that, I mean, what you've clearly said there is you recruited them, you recruited to the culture. You're in the word they love nowadays is you're intentional about this, right? Uh,
That's it.
and I think that's the difference because a lot of companies, the vision is nebulous, and
Mm.
there's misalignment at executive level and all of that kind of stuff. And it sounds like that was the recruiting to culture was super important to you.
Well, it was because also when we were going to sell, and look, we mainly were selling to big tech businesses.
Hmm.
So most apps on your phone, that is who we were selling those services to.
Right.
And actually, big tech, they really care about the cultural piece because to some degree, what we do is a commodity. Changing a light bulb, anybody can change a light bulb,
Mm.
or fixing things or statutory compliance, whatever. So what we had to do was come up with a bit of a hook that made us different to our competitors. And by the way, look, when we were a 30 million pound turnover business, I was going up against people 300 times our size
Yeah.
in the sales pitch.
Mhm.
So our competitors were massive established brands with 50,000 staff, let alone the 500 we had in the end. So as a salesperson, how do you convince that big tech business that sat across from you that you are a better bet for services to be delivered in your organization than the massive companies that no one
Mhm.
loses their job for choosing one of the big
Sure.
companies. They lose their job for choosing someone like us. And we then had to repay that favor. And luckily, no one ever lost their job for choosing us. So that was a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And how about for you personally in those days of like growing the business? What were the trade-offs for you personally, and how did you handle them?
Yeah. If you ask my wife, I probably didn't handle them particularly well.
Mhm.
The trade off is time. It's very simply time. I was your very stereotypical entrepreneur that would work every hour that was available. Everything I did was work related. I had no hobbies. I didn't do anything outside of it. Now, I believe that there is time in business where you need to be unbalanced because
Yeah.
you need to just absolutely grind to get the result that you want. And I don't really believe in balance all the way through. But for me, it was missing out on things with family, not going on holidays. And it was mainly my friends. It was the friends with the easiest no. Say it was a Friday night and a
Yeah.
mate said, "Hey, do you want to come to London and have a beer?" That's an easy no. I'm sorry, I can't. There's absolutely no chance. You're not even registering on my list at the moment. So I think for me, it was about understanding that that was a sacrifice that was I was making, but also I knew as long as I could keep my marriage together, which believe me was hard work, but we did, and we've been together for 20 years in total through this
Yeah.
whole thing. It
Congratulations.
was it was possible. Well, thank you. And we had two kids, and when you throw kids in the mix, it completely changes your
Mhm.
dynamic again. Children change the biology of your brain way more than an entrepreneurial financial thing can do. Well, certainly for me
Mhm.
anyway. So yeah, I was able to understand that I was aiming for a higher power. And I was very fortunate. Look, I managed to exit at 37 and I retired at that age and took a step back. It's 2 years ago now. And it's no surprise to my answer. I spent the last 2 years trying to rebuild those relationships that I'd destroyed by being an entrepreneur. And I'm
Mhm.
very fortunate that majority of them are still there.
Yeah. And what about and during that period of building the business, what were some of the biggest leadership challenges you faced?
The biggest one always was even when we got to say 20 million turnover and 200 staff, people just saying you're too small.
Right.
And like I go back to that piece when you're against a competitor that's literally 5 billion turnover and you're like this little 20 million pound company. And hopefully you can see I'm a very boisterous, overexcited like salesperson. So
Mhm.
when I would turn up with like a big box of donuts and say, "Hey, let's talk about what's happening on the weekend," that was a certain approach to sales. But actually, I wasn't very technical. I wasn't focusing on the real technical skill of what we brought as an organization. So for me, the biggest growth challenge is yes, when we were 5 million, maybe we're too small. Maybe we're still skittish
Yeah.
and there's not there's still a risk. When you're 20 million turnover with 200 staff and a load of processes, I know there's always cash restraints on businesses as they grow very quickly and the working capital challenges that come with that growth. But we were there, we were doing it, and we were a very accomplished business. So I called it friend zoning. So many times we get right to the end, we lean in for the kiss, and they
Mhm.
go, "Oh, really sorry, I really like you, but you're just a friend. We're going to go with the
Right.
prom queen or whatever instead."
Mhm.
And I think that was a real thing for us. And all you can do, and this is really good advice in that situation, kill them with kindness. Write them an email. Thank you so much. We're so lucky that we got to interact with you. Send them a box of donuts. Send them a bottle of champagne at Christmas. Whatever it is, make sure that even though they said no to you, you know that they know that you still love them and that you are there should anything go wrong. And I have one business that originally we didn't win. The new provider came in and didn't work out.
Right.
And we got the call back to say, "Hey, sorry, we made a mistake. Come back and help us out." And that is so powerful because then you're not going through a tender process to get in the door then at that stage.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's something because we live in this such a fast-paced world that people overlook
Mm,
doing things like that. Sometimes they just like lose a deal, move on, and say, "All right, well,
yeah.
forget that. I'll move on." Rather than, as you said, making sure that you leave some fertile seeds back there so that you can always hopefully return. And if it doesn't work out, that you're in pole position to jump
Yeah.
back in. And what do you think about going back to your background and where you came from?
Mm,
Do you think that gives you maybe a better insight into people and different types of people? Say if you'd have come from if you come from a public school background in the UK, which, just for our American listeners, public school is private school. I don't know why they call it that, but that's it's up. Take that up with the English.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, look, there is no doubt my community spirit, in terms of the estate where my family are from, is absolutely made me a richer person, because as a kid, everything I had to earn. I didn't get given anything. So this is true. Say we wanted to buy more toys, we'd have to go to a boot sale and sell our old toys so that we could
Right.
buy new ones with my dad. That's what we do on a Sunday, because we didn't have the money as a family to just keep buying new toys all the time. So but and also the other thing we had was community. So every Sunday, like, my entire family would get together, maybe 25 of us, squeeze into my nan's tiny living room with like 4 seats in it, and we'd all eat hot dogs and food together and just like be together. And
Hmm.
you all learn about each other's challenges and your insecurities and the problems that people are facing. And when you don't come from money, you have to problem solve all the time. And being an entrepreneur is about problem solving all the
Hmm.
time. But please don't get me wrong. People that go to private school and people that come from money go on to have amazing entrepreneurial careers as well. Like, it doesn't matter what your background is.
Yeah.
For me, I think it's mindset. But I just feel incredibly fortunate that that was my background, because that worked for me so well. And certainly when I worked in a sector where I had to be relatable to a lot of the staff, even though I was this successful entrepreneur running
Yeah.
around and doing whatever. And that was really important, because for me, I could walk into any site and have a conversation with someone, whether they were the CEO or whether they were the newest apprentice that we'd hired.
Hmm.
I didn't care about who they were. I was just there and I cared about them individually. And what I was exceptionally good at, and again, this is good advice, get to know people's what's going on outside of work. Work is one thing, but ask them about their kids. Remember their name, know what football team they support, what food they like to eat. It is so powerful for you to be able to just drop those little nuggets. And they're like, oh, wow, okay, you really did listen the last time that we spoke. And I think that can be really powerful. And although I can't remember anything my wife asked me to do, I'm able to tell you the kids' names of most of the staff that I hired. And that was probably just shows my imbalance through the process.
No, no, and absolutely, absolutely, and it's fascinating, that thing about just getting to know people a little bit differently, and that, and
Yeah.
that empathy, and
Mm.
naturally coming from where you came back from, where you came from. But and so tell me, here's one of the hardest things. Obviously, you're an entrepreneur. You built up your business, and you're exiting.
Mhm.
Um, what
Yeah.
was that like for you? Because that's such a, I mean, this is your baby. You have 10 years, you've invested into,
Yeah.
you've built it all up. What was it like? Because when you go through an M&A and a mergers and acquisition, whatever
Mm.
process, I mean, for
Yeah.
people who haven't been through it, it can be quite a brutal process in many ways. And there's people who are going to turn up and call your baby very ugly because they want to get the price down.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. I mean, look, we could do a whole podcast, and I
Mm.
have done, on what the exit process is like.
Mhm.
The one thing I say, I've been through 2 processes of sales, and I've also
Mhm.
bought 2 businesses as well. So, like, just get ready. You've never been asked so many questions. I love your analogy there. Your beautiful baby, all of a sudden, everyone's going to tell you how ugly it is and
Yeah.
why it's not worth the money that you thought it was, and that's absolutely true. You come to realize that if someone's going to give you $100 million for your business, they're going to spend a couple of $1 million making sure that it's
Yeah.
everything you say is true.
Mhm.
And actually, on one of the deals, we had 850 questions to answer in 3 weeks.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Like, that is pressure. If anyone has been under pressure, and the other thing with that is your dreams are now within reach. So now you know you're selling the business. And now all you've got to do to sell the business is get past this due diligence process, which is a
Mm.
difficult thing to do, but at least there's a goal now. Sometimes as an entrepreneur, you're running and running and running. And what are you aiming for? You don't really know what success looks like. And actually, now you have a very definite point. For me, I had 2 exits. So the first time I took a few million off the table, and I was able to buy my house and buy my mum and dad's house and my sister's houses, all that sort of nice stuff that I could get
Mhm.
out. And then I had a secondary beach money exit then in 2023, when I'd already bought all the things I wanted to do. So I was able to, I bought a farm over in Oxford where I live now, and spend the majority of my time. But the first thing I did after I got the money was I got on a train, and I got on a sleeper train, and I went from London all the way to the very tip of Scotland on my own. And I hired a car, and I drove literally to the very top of Scotland in the rain,
Nice.
just on my own for 2 days. Didn't speak to anybody. I was just decompressing, just letting all
Mhm.
that energy go. And it was really important. And when I was at university, I used to listen to Oasis a lot, back in the news, obviously these days, Oasis
Yeah,
in
yeah,
Dublin as well, actually, weren't they?
yeah.
And,
Mhm,
and actually there's a song called Going Nowhere. And one of the
mhm.
lyrics is I'm going nowhere on a train. And I really just wanted this moment where I sat there looking out the window going, what's life about? I don't know. I've just come off this amazing journey. And it was a great time of reflection for me, those couple of days. And also, I worked with a business psychologist up to the exit so that I could be prepared for what happened post exit. Because
Mhm.
it's like winning an Olympic medal. You train for your whole life, and all of a sudden, you've won, you've got your trophy. And actually, then depression, there's a real risk of it happening after that. So I'd worked very hard with Stuart about knowing I was swimming towards an island, what was going to be on that island when I got there, what was I going to do. And now, obviously, I come on lots of podcasts and tell the story and get to spend my time doing this. So I'm having a wonderful time since I finished up.
Yeah, that's a fantastic story, and I love that bit about the train, just because I
Mm.
mean we talk a lot about on this podcast is that people, because we live in this culture of being bombarded all the time and being distracted all the time, is that people don't even take a couple of moments a day to be with their own thoughts, to be with themselves and whatever. And I think that's so incredibly important. You can see the difference it makes. And obviously it was a huge thing for you to do that at the end, was to actually set yourself up properly. It's back to that intentional word, isn't it? Like be
Yes.
intentional about your next step.
Yeah. And also, I think I was your classic entrepreneur. I never celebrated success. Whenever
Mhm.
we won a big contract, and look, we were winning contracts that were up to say 5 million a year on 5-year deals. So I could go and win a 25 million pound contract quite easily. You wouldn't open a bottle of champagne. You'd just be like, how are we going to deliver this? What are we going to do? How is this going to work? And
Mhm.
all those insecurities that you have about your business, which entrepreneurs have, there was no time to celebrate. You just had to get on with it and work out how you were going to deliver. And people in sales know this. All these promises you've made to the customer at that stage, all of a sudden you're like, oh dear, now we
Yeah.
have to somehow come up with the answers to all those promises. And luckily for us, we did it incredibly well, but there was no time to stop and enjoy what we were doing. So I really was like full on and through that 9-year process. And so it was important for me to start the decompression process and just start to think, because I'm 39 now, start to think about what the rest of my life looks like. And that's an important point for me to be at now and think about the future.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, listen, Andrew, this has been fascinating. All of Andrew's information will be below this video. But before we go, please do remind people about what you do.
What do I do now, or what
Yeah.
their business was? These days, I don't know. Maybe you call me like a social media person. I go around telling the story. I do podcasts and various bits and pieces. I'm really there to try and guide people and give advice. One, on how to start a business. Two, how to exit a business. And three, what it's like after a business, because those three things are very
Mhm.
different times in an entrepreneur cycle, and each of them has its own positives and negatives in lots of different ways. So yeah. So if anybody wants to reach out, please, my details are below.
Excellent. Well, listen, thanks again, Andrew. Thank you for watching and listening. And I will see you all again very soon. Thank you.